Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Pandemonium in the Tangent Cube of Science. Coming to you not live from the 10x10x10 Tangent Cube. As always, it is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and it is episode 42, which means this is an episode about life, the universe, and everything, of course. Damn right. So we got a bunch of guests with us today, two of them from MineTheHive, and this is going to be an awesome show. You guys picking up on it? We're just starting it with no practice whatsoever. You guys hearing this? Picking it all up?
Oh, I'm hearing this. I'm picking it up.
All right. Sweet.
Yeah, all right. We got Nemo and Mantis in the house from MineTheHive.
That's right, the
Mantis.
Mantis.
You guys, all the listeners out there in the universe.
I've read about the Mantis people in a lot of abduction accounts, man. I'm not really sure.
Hey, I'm not affiliated with that.
All right.
Spread some love and knowledge.
Cool, because those are kind of scary. I'm glad you're not affiliated with that.
Hell yeah.
So is I want to ask the name Nemo, is that as in captain? Like from 20,000 Leagues?
It's more like Little Nemo, you know, the classic
all right, yeah.
comic. There's like there's a early 90s anime movie, I guess, is like American
that,
Japan.
Yeah, the bed in the Dreamland or whatever.
Yeah. And he runs
was
into King Morpheus and everything.
Oh, cool.
You know, the dream god. He meets her, his daughter, Princess.
Nice. Well, that brings us.
I know, I remember that.
That brings us right to the topic of the dreams. Like we were talking to you yesterday, and you were saying that that's one of your main interests, right? Is dreaming and astral travel, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I have my own, I guess you'd say, theories about it, but I definitely I don't have full control over anything.
Okay, so I've read I've read a lot about this. I've never been able to do it, I don't think. One time I might have done it, but it I got so excited that I just woke up. So yeah,
that's definitely
like it's like I associate it with lucid dreaming, and then in some way with sleep paralysis too. Like I thought that I was entering into sleep paralysis, but there was like this tingling sensation, and then suddenly what's that? Go ahead.
Those all kind of go hand in hand. And
yeah.
Like one of the things is like the explanation for like sleep paralysis and certain types of like night terrors where you're just in your physical body and paralyzed is that you're not remembering where you're actually going in those trance-like states, basically.
Yeah, and I've also read in various forums online, people have they've claimed to be posting their experiences directly of trying to do astral travel or whatever. And there was one that I remember like kind of vividly. It was the guy was freaking himself out because when he was going into that state, he was, of course, seeing like strange things because he was waking up in his room, basically in his astral form. That's what he was saying. And there were like these enormous, glowing spiders on the walls, and he said that he had seen those since childhood, and those had always prevented him from going any further. And other people were like saying that, like, yeah, that's a guardian. That's sort of like you have to overcome that fear to continue on in the whole thing. And I thought that was fascinating.
I definitely don't have anything to say about like spiders or anything, but there are definitely there are things you need to, I feel like, overcome, and you will be, or else you will be, I guess, disabled or unable to really progress too far into it, because there are like there's the real time zone, and that is the it gets progressively more abstract the further down the astral hole, I guess.
Oh, okay.
You could say.
As in the things you're experiencing and seeing?
It is a lot like lucid dreaming, like you were saying, and one of the major problems with lucid dreaming is as soon as you start to think about it too much, then you wake up.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of a conundrum.
Like that's one of the things you have to practice, right? Like to lucid dream, you have to practice the ability to not get excited about it. You kind of have to,
Not get,
Definitely.
Yeah.
The thing I always found that helped when I was big into lucid dreaming, all that kind of stuff. It's like once I had my triggers, but once I figured out I was dreaming, immediately I would start like rubbing my hands together. Because in theory, I've read this book that when you're dreaming and you start to realize you're dreaming, you'll start to feel your bed and you'll wake up.
Yeah.
But if you rub your hands together, you get a feel for the dream and you'll stay in the dream. So I just do that every time, and I'm sure I look ridiculous, like, what am I going to do today? Funnest times,
Yeah, that's cool.
Great stuff.
That's cool. I remember the stuff about the triggers. Like you're supposed to find triggers that like you have to do them during your waking life a bunch in order for them to like transfer into your dreams. And then the trigger needs to be something that will give you the association to realize, oh, this is a dream, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's common ones like trying light switches. Light switches apparently don't work in dreams. Looking your hands. Your hands are supposed to be weird. Trying to do little things like flying.
Yeah, flying. If you read the back of like if you have like a bag of chips or a book, you read it,
true
you look
that.
away and you read it again, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
And
So so on the show a couple of times we've discussed dreaming.
the flying thing is a big thing, though. A lot of times that's like kind of a gamble because you're kind of maybe taking a header off of like a 5-story building.
Yeah, it's true. You might not want to try that one out.
Yeah.
Safety.
Start from the ground. Like that's what always happens to me. If I end up flying, I find out by jumping really, really far, and then I'm like, holy shit, I can fly.
Okay, well, there you go. We're saying don't jump off building, folks.
Right.
For your health.
That's right. This is not Matrix, guys. Like start simple. Jump off of like a little box or something.
But you can't say don't try lucid dreaming at home.
Start from the ground.
What were you saying, Kyle?
You can't say don't try lucid dreaming at home because I mean you definitely don't want to try lucid dreaming like in a
do
hotel.
I need to get a hotel room or something?
I mean, you can. I mean, you can lucid dream anywhere, really. As long as you're like physically safe, I reckon,
Yeah.
Just doing anywhere, get a quick little session in.
But you brought up something interesting, Mantis, about the light switch. We've talked about this a couple of times on the show. Russ originally pointed it out, and I started thinking about it. And it was basically that, like, as far as you can tell, like, he's never had a dream where he's had a cell phone, and I haven't either. Or that I've used the internet or something. We were trying to kind of line it out. Like,
The idea that I had initially was like, anytime something new comes into my life that I like a new job or a new place that I live, eventually it appears in my dreams. But my phone, which I use all the time, has never appeared in my dreams. And then I started to think, well, what kind of technology has? And I realized that I've never gotten on a computer. I've never used the internet. Nothing, no complicated electronics. There might have been televisions. I'm not sure. I can't really, but as far as I remember,
people using technology that you just weren't using.
No.
Have you always seen it?
I think the most complex technological thing that I've used in a dream is either like high architecture, like skyscrapers, or vehicles. But I've never used. I've never even used an old school telephone. Well, maybe they're guns. Yeah, there's guns, but those are like 15th century.
That's a good point. I don't recall pulling up phones either immediately, but I've used. I played video games. I had a crazy lucid dream.
Okay.
Call of Duty one time, but like that's about it. But I don't remember phones.
So I had a couple of people. Yeah, I had a couple of people respond to that show and say that they were like, dude, I've played video games before. I'm like, okay, that's valid, but like, have you ever used a computer besides playing games? Like, because when I talked to them about it, they're like, yeah, you're right. It was kind of the computer, or it was where the computer was, but I don't know if it was a computer because I just sat down and started playing, and I didn't have to do anything.
True.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it more in terms of like the internet and the connectivity to other people. Like I've never used a phone to connect to someone else in a dream to talk to them. If I ever had a communication at a distance with somebody in a dream, it was always a knowing. Like they just communicated directly to me, or I communicated directly to them from a long distance away. There was no electronic device involved in the process, and that's kind of the way I started thinking about it.
I'd say a dream would be like an illusion. I've definitely seen I've seen like a phone and messages I couldn't necessarily interpret in the morning, but I've also seen very large, tall, bald men telling me things and then running down like hallways and waking up in the morning and not really remembering what they told me either. So I'd say it's a way of perceiving communication. Like people communicate a lot through phones, and I don't know. I've definitely seen phones and had abstract communications I couldn't really translate when I woke up.
Yeah.
They weren't really too profound, I guess. But it's like the same thing where, like, you know, I saw some nebulous creature who was doing something to me and
so
woke up in the morning.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of this. I haven't. I've managed to get in a lucid dream a couple times, and like I said, astral travel. Like I woke up right after, but we have a friend who
never just change the colors on something, or just you like freely flown for like hour. How many dreams would you say you flew in?
A lot, but it's never, well, a lot of dreams, but it's never flying, and I don't ever realize that I'm dreaming during it either, which is I haven't found a way to turn that into a trigger because I can't do it in real life.
For sure.
But yeah, I've definitely had a lot of flying dreams. But I
would say I pull out my. It's kind of like an unhealthy. I like used to chew gum a lot when I was a child.
Okay.
Now I'll be chewing gum and like pulling like gobs of like taffy that are like fistfuls out of my mouth as I'm like trying to like try to talk or something. And sometimes it'll pull out like my teeth. And sometimes in those types of situations, I'll be like, whoa, I don't have to be doing this. And I'll run and start like flying away.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like,
I gotta go.
Not really healthy trigger. It is, it's something I've learned, like when that's the weird part about it is like, not every time I pull out like half of my jaw, I don't always realize like, hey, this isn't real. A lot of times I'll like be fretting as I'm pulling like all these metal pieces. I wore like headgear, I guess, when I was younger, and like wore really heavy like rubber bands with my braces.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Like
so that like appears in the, yeah. I got you.
It's like a physical type thing in a way.
Yeah,
I guess, but so I don't know.
So yeah, so that created triggers for you, like in a way. Is that what you're saying? Like basically.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Like that's probably where like a lot of the cues come from.
Okay, so I have something like that. I was thinking about this. You basically have this sort of scenario that reoccurs. It's not necessarily the whole dream itself reoccurring, but there's a scenario that reoccurs, and I've had that, and it's that like I have had a lot of fighting dreams. And when I go to fight, I can't push my arm very fast. Like when my fist goes up to the guy's face, it like just pushes on it.
It doesn't connect to his face.
Yeah, and it's like right, and I'm like pushing on it. I'm punching, but every time my fist gets there, it's just like barely going, and I'm like struggling to move. So
I've heard that from a lot of people. That's a recurring thing.
So that recurs for me a lot. Like this, like I'm trying to do something physically active, but every motion is slow with very little inertia or force. So I could use that.
It's like you're underwater up to the point to the, like where you actually do touch their face, but there's no force when you hit their face.
So basically, I could use that. Like whereas if that starts happening to me in a dream, I could possibly like try to use that to trigger where I'm like, this is not reality, and then I could lucid dream. Is that basically kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like in a way that's like kind of like you'd have to be getting in enough fights in your real life to like differentiate it.
Because the way
so like, it's not like maybe the best thing to like.
all right.
The way to make it,
because you'd be fighting people in real life, you know, to be like, oh, cool.
The way that I've read to make a trigger is it has to be something you can do while you're awake. Like so, like one of the most common ones is like anytime you go through a doorway in your house, right? You obviously can't do this in public because it would annoy people, but like knock 3 times on the side of the door, like dunk dunk dunk, and say, "I'm not dreaming." Right? That'll eventually translate into your dreams, and then you'll realize when you do it, wait, I am fucking dreaming.
I need to get a punching bag, basically, is what I'm saying.
For sure.
Yeah, there's definitely
that's why the white one is a good one.
Oh, hey guys, real quick. We've had this situation before with multiple people through the program, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, but just to point it out, there's like a little bit of a lag. So you got to try not to over talk each other. You just keep that in mind.
It's like it's really easy to interrupt people or talk over top of them. You guys haven't been doing it really badly, but we're just saying like we usually try to point that out. So just keep it in mind.
But
yeah, no problem. I'm trying to figure this whole app doohickey thing out. There's cool shit going on.
But Mantis, what were you were about to say something? What was the deal?
Oh, I was just saying there's like there's a lot of good methods. I was really one point in time really big into trying to astral project and lucid dreaming, and I would say like I got really good at lucid dreaming, kind of okay at astral projecting. Like there's a few moments there where I felt like maybe there was just kind of like maybe that could have been something legitimate, but like those are sparse because I used to suffer from sleep paralysis and it was terrifying. Bloody terrifying and shit like that. So then after a while, like for the longest time, like I used to fight it, but after I stopped fighting it, I just kind of went with it. That's why I try to use it to like astral project out. If I didn't astral project out per se, I always had crazy lucid dreams. All the time.
That's what I learned about it too. About sleep paralysis, I eventually learned that it was possible to use that as an entrance to the astral tripe stuff. So
definitely, and it's either way, you know, you have really profound experiences if you use those lucid moments while you're dreaming to try to reach deeper like insights about yourself, I would say, I guess, in the world and things like that. Just kind of reaching your own enlightenment in a way, or just for that moment or so.
Yeah, I had a lot of profound moments of something dark and evil trying to kill me while I was having sleep paralysis.
Oh yeah, me too, man. When the first half, man, it was just the worst thing ever.
And it's always behind you. Like you wake up and you're on your side and you can't look back there, but you know that there's something back there and it wants to fucking eat you. You know, and you're just like, damn it.
Did you see anything at all? Like when I first had it, I heard things like talking to me and shit. Like it was fucked, dude. Like
I've never seen it, which drives me nuts, but I've heard it. And like it's gone so far as to where I feel it like pushing down on the freaking bed like that. Oh yeah, that was like I'm like, all right, that's real. Like because I could feel the bed impacting from the weight of something behind me, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm gonna die.
yeah, definitely. What I like to think it is, like it could be many things, but I like to think it's like just like the human psyche, the fear of like what happens. Like I guess psychologically too, when you just wake up and you can't move, your mind just plays all these tricks. It calls up on all the horror movies, all the sci-fi movies you've seen. You know, it's like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? You know, it's like your mind just plays all these tricks. When like in reality, it's your body's still, because like when you sleep, your brain paralyzes your body so you don't adapt to your dreams. Right. There's disorders you get where you can wake up in that state and you can't move, but you're still kind of technically dreaming, more or less. So I guess if you freak out, your REM sleep, your brain juices just make you wig out.
You're talking about like they call it a hypnagogic state, right? Like
bam, that's what it is. Yeah.
So Kyle, tell him your sleep paralysis story real quick.
So the only main time I ever can remember having sleep paralysis full on, I was at a buddy's house and it was 3 of us and we were all watching a movie. I was tired, so I took off, went to the back guest bedroom or whatever and crashed out. And then I wake up with the sleep paralysis, can't move, and there's like this crazy noise happening, like a very repetitive, you know, sort of, I don't know, like techno sounding yum yum yum.
Yeah,
yum,
like
yum
a buzzing weird
thing going on. And then there's this person standing in the room, big guy, and I think it's one of the guys that was out there, Matt, who was a big guy. And he's standing in there and he's saying my name, like Kyle, you know, like I don't know, I can't recall exactly what the voice was like, but I just in my mind I thought it was him. I thought it was Matt, and I couldn't respond to him. But I was like freaking out, like I couldn't move. You know, I didn't know. I've never heard of sleep paralysis before or anything, so I had no idea what was happening to me. So I had this whole session of like freaking out or whatever, and then I think at some point I must have somehow dozed back off, like into sleep, and then woke up later, and like no one was there, and I was just like, oh my god, what the hell was that? And I jumped out of bed and I went out there. And the two guys were like still sitting on the couch watching the movie, and I was like, Matt, what the hell what were you calling me for? Like, what was the deal? And he was like, what are you talking about? You know, I was like, you were just in the room, like standing there, like calling me or something. And he was like, no, I've been sitting here the whole time. And I was just like, holy shit. It like scared the shit out of me. And I would never sleep in that room ever again.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. But basically it was just like this dark figure, very large and looming over me. So I thought it was him.
Yeah, it's definitely similar to mine. I was, I think I was like in high school or something like that. I was sleeping on my stomach. And because I've always had just like the biggest fear, just like from reading alien stuff, all that, of like sleeping on my back and like waking up and having like grays in front of me or something like that. So, you know, that's always terrified me. So like I'm sleeping on my stomach. I wake up. I'm like all paralyzed. I get the buzzing vibrating you're talking about. Like the
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what? And like I hear like this voice like, I've come for you.
Oh, shit.
And it's like as she's like talking, like the vibration got louder and louder. It was like,
yeah.
Like at the peak of it, I just felt like this hand reach underneath the covers and like grab me by my throat, and I woke up and it was fucked.
Yeah. See, like, so of course, materialist science is like, this is all in your mind. It's just in your mind, and it's nothing's really happening. But like throughout history, people have talked about this and like debated this whole. I mean, like you can find paintings of people having, you know, the old hag syndrome thing, you know, with some, like the idea of something demonic sitting on your chest or whatever. And like I have a hard time.
I experienced, I guess, sleep paralysis before was. I felt like a pressure sitting on my chest, and like I was being compressed.
Yeah, I have. I don't know. I have a hard time with the idea that this is all.
When I was a child, I did have I guess, recurring nightmare where I would wake up having been stabbed in the back by a kind of boogeyman figure after having my ankle pulled out from me on the same step in my house. And I'd wake up with the actual pain in my back. And I finally did sidestep that, I guess, and make it away from him.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes. But it was kind of like a recurrent nightmare with a recurring, like a genuine, like painful element I felt when I like woke up.
Oh.
And I mean, you know, that was through, I guess, like preteen years and whatnot.
So that's what I'm saying. Like that kind of thing is, it's really difficult because there's so many people that report these things, and they like you, they sometimes have residual physical symptoms. And I know that the mind is a powerful thing over the body, but I have a hard time with this, especially because it starts happening to people. And they like Kyle, he had no idea what sleep paralysis was. You know, this wasn't like, we didn't really grow up watching horror movies and shit like that. So he didn't have the cultural background to sort of inject anything into what was happening to him. Like he didn't think of grays or aliens because this was kind of before we were looking at all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's something else going on here, and that the whole like it's hypnagogic state. This is related to narcolepsy, sleep apnea, whatever. All that stuff is a materialist definition that comes from them insisting that there can't be anything non-physical. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see that too. Like I like to think both ways. Like I like to try to keep X-Files kind of thing. Like I want to believe, you know, because there's so much BS out there. But like I was big into the whole thought too. Like I was projecting stuff like that, and like I just felt like it was too much to deal with. Like if it was real, like it would be too much to deal with. Like I guess like physically, if it was real, like the whole worrying about the astral world and entities and demons and all these like different mind states, stuff like that, and worrying about the physical state. I feel like it's like a lot to take on as just like a person, you know. If it was real, you know, it'd probably be separate for a reason, you know, just not to overload people or some shit like that, you know.
Yeah. So what were you saying, Nemo? Go ahead, Nemo. What were you saying?
What was that?
I was saying, okay, yeah, Nemo, go ahead, bro. What were you saying? You had a response to him?
I was just fucking around. I was just saying it's like all post-physical. I'm like, I don't know. There's a cool song that's called Post-Physical. I'm like,
Post-physical. Oh, okay, post-physical.
Like,
yeah.
You know, like we are all intertwined in like this whole mess, but it might not necessarily all have to be like carbon based forever.
All right, so yeah. So Mantis, what you're saying, I agree with that. I think it's what you said though is really like that part is important to yeah, it's all right, bro. The important part that you said there was that it's a lot to deal with, and I completely agree. Like that is an enormous amount of things to take on, like as them suddenly becoming real to you, like, you know, to accept that, okay, this is real. That's a lot of shit to just like appear out of nowhere, like technically, like if you just purely believe in a materialist universe, like a physical universe, and then all of a sudden you have to accept that there's this whole other plane and many planes of existence that are non-material. That's
especially when it really starts beginning to happen, you know, as an adolescent, and you had just gotten over accepting that the world that you lived in actually was fucking real, because you woke up as a baby and just light and sound and all this crazy shit's coming in, and you're finally able to make sense of it, and you're like, okay, everything's solid. I know where things are. I know what that light is. I know what the dark is. And then bam, you get hit with this whole other fucking idea that it's a lot more than just that.
Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like, just at least in my case, when I went in it, like I like to go hard and things, like to go 100. So I went like all in. I was doing like lucid dreaming, astral projection. I was just reading all these crazy books from like bookshops. I was like training to see auras, and like I just remember there's just all culminated to this one event. I was driving home one night, and it was a dark road, and I drove past a stop sign, and like the after image, like of me seeing like that after image or of the stop sign scared the little shit out of me. I almost crashed because it was just so vibrant, so huge. Just like bam, I was like, oh, like I had a slight heart attack. I'm like, okay, I gotta stop doing this. I can't be doing this, you know. Like I gotta function as a human being. I don't need crazy with vision fucking me up, you know. Like so whatever. But I like to believe in all that stuff, you know. I just try to not chase waterfalls.
I like your quote that like you know, like I want to believe, but there's so much BS out there. Like that should be added on to that, like that statement. Because I have a want to believe poster like that somebody gave me a couple of years ago. It's like, you know, I want to believe, it's got the UFO up there, but it's a fake one, right? It's a known fake.
Yeah,
right?
the Billy Mayer.
It's one of the Billy.
UFO,
it's one of the Billy Mayer pictures, and it's like I want to believe, and like I totally need to go up there with a Sharpie and add that, but there's so much BS out there because like this that's exactly.
Which I guess it kind of does come through that in a poster, I guess, because if you research it and you realize Billy Mayer, he was like kind of like this big guy at the time, but he turned out to be a fraud. So I guess I want to believe it's kind of like a play on that, I guess, you know.
I think Billy Mayer was poetic. Yeah, exactly. I think Billy Mayer was like a lot of quote unquote contactees, like they called him back then, that he had some kind of formative experience in the very beginning. He spent the rest of his life making shit up though, because people were demanding. You know, like he had all these like fans and shit like that. And so like it kind of, I see the same thing happening with what they call, you know, poltergeist cases, right? So there is something happening. There's some kind of phenomena taking place. And then all these investigators show up and they're kind of like in the house with the family, and they're like walking around, where is this shit flying around or whatever, and stuff is not happening. So people will try to just throw a plate so that they'll, you know, see it and get out of there or whatever. Like, I think the same thing happened to a lot of the contactees. They started making shit up because either they wanted to keep riding the wave or because there was so much demand for new experiences, you know?
Yeah, it sucks, dude. Like, hypothetically, if someone were to get contacted by an extraterrestrial, you know, or they told the world, either people think they were batshit crazy or just like want all this proof that they couldn't like uphold. You know, they're like, dude, he just flew down his fucking spaceship. I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah, gave me a pancake and left. That's right.
yeah, right. Like, shit, I don't know, man. Quit badgering me and shit. You know, so it's so I'm sure like if people really haven't visited, I'm sure there's a lot of people just keep it to themselves. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, like even
what happened.
It like even if it's not extraterrestrial, it's like I know that there is. I think that there probably has been paleo contact of some kind, but a lot of these experiences to me seem to be not like I can't say, like, okay, if either of you guys ever looked at any of Jacques Vallée's work on the UFO stuff?
I do not recall.
Yeah, I'm not familiar
Okay.
with that.
Okay, that's cool. He just basically said, like, he's an astronomer, okay, a scientist, whatever. He went into and he did computer science back in the day before it was really a thing. And then he got really interested in the UFO question right from the beginning. So he worked with RCA. He's worked with Alan Hynek back when they were still doing Blue Book. But his whole hypothesis on the UFO thing is basically, it comes down to like, there is a physical component that cannot be denied, but mostly it seems to be having to do something to do with consciousness. Like there's too many things that can't be explained physically. So he thinks it's both. Like he talks about like, he imagines sometimes, you know, like, so imagine if there is some non-physical or maybe extra dimensional entities out there who have learned to project things into our dimension that do have some kind of physical component to them. But they're not entirely physical. That's why they can change shape rapidly and just do all this kind of crazy shit that people see. So it's really a fascinating thing. Like he basically he kind of goes off on this thing about whatever it is that we're interacting with has been interacting with the human race for a really long time, and that they seem to come from a realm of pure information, which is why there's all these weird synchronicities associated with alien contact. Right, like information lines up in impossible ways that you cannot explain using a purely physical universe. So I don't know. I think
You're familiar with like Jim Mars, right?
Yes.
I guess, like,
Oh, that guy. That guy's he's got this theory, I guess, where like there's basically three explanations for the rapid expansion of like human technological prowess, and it's like either they discovered, you know, the Ark of the Covenant, and it had some amazing technological, which could basically just be kind of a tablet if you think about it. If they just had a tablet that didn't get broken, and had like a way to be charged, then you could store terabytes conceivably of information, and eventually like have tablets within 100 years, which is where we see ourselves already. Or aliens gave it to us directly, or there was remote viewing, and
of the future,
people extracted it from
future.
Hey, you know what? Like I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but since I've been researching this whole thing about giant blocks being made in quarries and then left there in ancient times, like the German Archaeological Institute is everywhere. They have found all of these things. Like every ancient site that I went to look at, like Tiahuanaco, like Egypt, the Aswan Quarry, the stuff at Göbekli Tepe, like it's all Germans. Why is it all?
They're pretty evil characters in the Indiana.
Yeah, dude, Europeans, dude, just going over to.
I know. I'm like
racing history, and just like 999.
999.
If you would not like this, 999. Back during World War II, just stomping shit.
Ja, tons of macht gut und ist sehr schnell.
Is that
much love to your German listeners? I got much love for Germany.
Yeah, we love you. We love you, Germans. Don't worry. But is that?
Thanks for finding all that shit for us.
Yeah, thanks for finding all the weird shit for us, Germans. Yeah, I wonder if that's why in England the emergency number is 999. No. All right.
Yikes, dude.
This app is pretty cool.
Yeah. The Germans also, Brett, the show observer, is reminding us that the Germans were also involved in the whole the cocaine mummies deal. You guys remember that? Where they were doing all this research on scans and various things on like they had over 100 mummies that were non-royal. They were like wealthy citizens of ancient Egypt or whatever. But they found like cocaine and tobacco in them, which was enormously controversial because supposedly those plants only grow in the New World, which like ancient Egypt could not have had any contact with, according to mainstream archaeology. So yeah, that was the Germans too.
Dude, they're all in cahoots with each other, dude. They're traveling around talking to each other. I mean, because there's pyramids on pretty much they found supposed pyramids on every continent.
Yeah.
So of course, it's an easy structure to make too, but I'm sure they were going on trade routes and stuff like that, dude, going around talking to each other.
Yeah.
Do you believe that, Mantis, that because the Orthodox explanation for that is like, well, the pyramid is the easiest structure to build, so of course everybody built them. Like, I don't buy that.
I mean, it's a pretty good sound structure that too, but I also like to think they're all talking to each other, you know, traveling around, trading goods and stuff like that, you know, exploring the world and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah, you're talking about diffusionism.
You know? Just as a builder, it's not easy to build a pyramid. It's not fucking easy.
Yeah, we both have been in construction for.
I mean, if you did yes, granted, a step pyramid where you can just stack up stones in it, but to put openings in them.
That's when it starts getting hard.
You know, where you're building this massive stone structure and then you have a chamber inside that is not collapsing is not easy. That is extremely fucking difficult to do. So I just
definitely not. I think that it ties back to like ancient like masonry, you know, what it was. It was just like a sacred art.
Yes.
Because like back then it was passed down word of mouth, you know, these ancient people knew how to do certain things, mathematics and stuff like that, because they're very in tune with the things world around them, you know.
Yeah,
they've sent robots up some of those little tunnels.
Yes,
and shown some pretty like basically what would have been kind of tantamount to electrical hookups.
Yeah, the copper handles or whatever that were sticking out of the quote unquote door at the end of the north shaft. Yeah,
a German did that too. Gantenbrink.
Yeah. That's right. It's all Germans. Damn it.
But yeah, like so the way I tend to look at it is like any time in construction, when you're building something, the building, if you're a good builder, you're building it for number one, a purpose, and then the other main fundamental aspect of the structure itself is to withstand its own weight, right? Yeah. So you have like the economical issue of like what's available to you, or you know what materials are available to you, and how easy it is to use those materials. But then what is the purpose of the structure, and then can it support its own weight? And when you're dealing with solid stone, supporting its own weight is very difficult to overcome. And so it seems to me that the pyramid has to be
serve kind of primary function to really justify all that labor and shit.
Yes, all of that work they had. If they could have organized society to do this incredible feat of building this pyramid, it must have been that everybody believed that the payoff was going to justify the incredible amount of work it was going to take to build. So I can't imagine it was like, I'm going to bury myself in here.
And then you can never use it again. Right.
No, I definitely see what you're saying, because it would definitely have to be like, you know, it definitely was, you know, it's very tied into the culture with the politics, with the pharaoh or the king, whoever lived in the pyramid, or the what am I looking for, like the priests or whatever, the high bishops or whatever, or, you know, they all tied back to like the sun god, you know, and stuff like that, whether with the Aztecs, you know, they had their god, Quetzalcoatl and stuff like that, the feathered serpent, you know, the Mayans, they all had their pyramids, you know, only the Aztecs were a little bit more brutal with their blood gods and all that stuff. You know.
Got the spiral complex going on too, though. So that was a pretty mathematical equation.
Yeah, I think I read an article recently, like either this year or last year, they found like a pyramid made of like skulls from mainly like women and children. Whoa. I think like in South America, like an Aztec pyramid or something like that, underground. Or
okay,
like that.
Yes, underground. They did find like there was a massive sort of cave complex, and they found it was. I remember that now that you mentioned it was underground. I remember seeing that
massive.
Yeah,
good God.
Pyramid structure tower. Savagery.
Yeah,
I think it would just be like a common fascination with, I guess, just like humans / primates, you know, just putting things up in a pile, like a baby, just putting things like in a pile, like Genghis Khan putting heads in a pile, just building a pyramid,
Yes,
like,
but once you're putting them in a pile that's like so precisely aligned to like the cardinal directions that we don't even build buildings that precisely aligned today. That's what I mean.
I'm sure we do. I mean, because like if you think about like a skyscraper, it's just like a more fancier pyramid.
No, okay, no. I'm not saying skyscrapers.
Have to be like, oh, there's where the sun sets. There's where the sun rises up, and let's delineate from there.
Yeah. So the Great Pyramid. Okay, so you have to think about it. Like the Great Pyramid is 14 acres at the base. 14 acres. Okay, to take a square that large and align it to within 3/60ths of a degree to true north, it could be done today, but like the architect would say, why do you want to do that? Because it would be so freaking hard. Like
I was saying, it's a combination of like politics, religion, and ego. You get the pharaoh. I mean, think about it, you get like someone like Donald Trump. He's like, okay, I'm gonna build the tower, the biggest tower. It's gonna align with the sun. It's gonna be perfect. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
He's the boss. I'm glad to see like a pharaoh. It's gonna be the greatest pyramid the world has ever seen.
Maybe in the history of pyramids.
Right, and most almost like
I've seen a lot of pyramids. A lot of great people build a lot of great pyramids. Okay, but this is going to be the greatest.
I've definitely seen pictures in ancient Egypt or today Egypt. There's pyramids that are like they've tried at first and it didn't come out as well, so it's kind of like abandoned it. So there's like these weird misshapen pyramids out in the desert that are much smaller than the much greater ones. So they definitely practice with making smaller ones until they can just make it on a much grander scale.
But those worst ones are actually newer than the
are they?
Yes, they are.
The worst ones.
Yeah, the new like the Giza pyramids, which are the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafre, and then the Pyramid of the other one that I can't never remember the name. Those are the old some of the oldest pyramids in Egypt. They were built in the Old Kingdom, like the 4th dynasty. So that's like the beginning of the pyramid building, and they were the best ones that they ever built. So it's really difficult to explain. Like, I mean, I agree with you. There are enormous pyramids that are like very poorly built, but those are actually much newer than the really good ones. So it's kind of like, at least in that sense, it doesn't follow the linear development model that most of archaeology goes with. And the Great Pyramid itself has so many crazy mathematical, like, quote unquote coincidences built into it, like the speed of light. Like, it has the speed of light built into it. Like, that's really a difficult thing to understand, and you can't really apply it to coincidence because it's the probability that it would be done by accident is infinitesimal. So
it does have like the characteristics of being more of an energy producer or energy harnesser of some sort.
The only structures we build in modern days that are that large and that require that much work are power plants. That's right.
Yeah. And, but like, are you like familiar with Drunvalo, like Melchizedek?
Yeah, Melchizedek.
Like,
yes.
The Serpent of Light.
Yeah.
And like, because we were talking earlier, I guess, about the underlying current of the world.
Yeah, the telluric currents. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Serpent of Light. Sorry, that's my dog that's kind of barking.
It's all right. Every time we've had a guest, an animal shows up.
Hey, but dude, John Anthony West had a dog barking on his podcast.
That's
so
right.
It's freaking cool.
It's
dude.
totally fine, bro.
But the whole. What do you think about the world having its own kundalini, like a human does?
That's the part of that's part of the Gaia idea, right? That the Earth itself is like a living being, right?
Yeah. And at least what he said was that it passed the kundalini passed through in the 60s, and that was the reason for the fucking revolution and shit.
Okay.
But I mean, I read that book and I liked it.
Yeah, well, that sounds like some of the things that I think about Sitchin. Like Sitchin was pointing out a lot of very interesting things. I don't think he had everything right. Like how he was, he was kind of like indicating that these Anunnaki had like 1970s rocket technology because that's what he was writing the books, right? But
yeah,
but like that doesn't. You can't like.
think that's how it would work. Yeah.
So, like, basically, the idea that the Earth is an actual living being, and that it has a spirit just like anything else, and thus a Kundalini. I'm okay with that idea. I don't think it passed through in the '60s, though. That would probably not be right.
Gaia, is that that one dude with the big forehead? Gaia? What's his name?
Oh yeah, like the original environmentalist. Oh yeah, you're talking about David Icke.
No, I'm talking about David Icke.
Yeah.
Is that guy? No, David Wilcock. That guy.
Oh, Wilcock. Yeah.
Wilcock. That guy. Okay, no, I think that's something different. Gaia Online or whatever, their website or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Wilcock's pretty cool. He's done a couple of really good interviews with Graham Hancock. So.
Yeah.
But he has some wild ideas. But whatever. Like.
Yeah, a lot of people do. So.
But what were you talking about? What did you say? The Serpent of Light? What was the name of that?
Yeah, it's just one of his books, like, because he wrote like the secrets, the ancient secrets of the flower of the life and shit.
Yeah, the Serpent of Light is the Kundalini. It's a snake. It's a spirit snake or whatever. It was envisioned to be part of it.
Where does he get that Serpent of Light?
He wrote some book where he goes around the world
Hindu,
like fucking healing places and shit. With by dropping crystals and key ponds and fucking bitches on desert islands.
It's pretty baller.
I understand. No, I think because
it's an alright book, dude. And he may have done that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just I'm not taking sides.
Well, I'm just saying that when you said Serpent of
legitimately some of that shit. It's I don't know.
When you said Serpent of Light in context with power plants, I immediately thought electricity.
Yeah.
Like we're just talking about power here. So if that came from ancient Hindu stuff,
it's kind of.
What
is it? Is it still there?
Pyramid, and that's where
All right, hold on. Start over, bro. We lost you for a bit there. Start over.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
it just broke. Your connection broke up. That was all.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I went outside. I kind of missed you guys for a second. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries.
So what were you saying about the Serpent of Light?
The Serpent of Light is the Kundalini of the earth, I guess.
And that is it. Okay, so the Kundalini idea is Hindu. Is it Hindu?
It's like a yogi, I think.
Okay.
Hindu type ideal with a meditative repose and all that.
Yeah, and yogi stuff is incredibly ancient, right?
Try to raise your Kundalini without having your chakras opened. You could the results wouldn't be cool, basically.
Right. So either of you guys ever listened to Where Did the Road Go? That podcast?
I've heard of it. What's it all about?
That guy, one of the reasons he started his podcast is because, and he didn't find this out until he was much older, but he was one of the few people that have a spontaneous Kundalini awakening during, and yes, he tells the whole story about he was like, dude, I had all this crazy shit was happening to me physically, and I had no idea what was going on, and it was because he was having.
I wonder what noise you make,
Well, it was an ongoing,
or a blissful.
It was an ongoing thing. Yeah. Oh God. It was an ongoing thing that went on for years. It caused all kinds of physical problems, and of course that was because, or at least that's the idea was that he had chakra blocks in certain areas, and that would cause physical ailments because this thing was attempting to rise and it was hitting these blockages and stuff. So yeah.
Sanskrit.
Man, he's got to clean out his chakras, man. He's slacking, man.
Yeah, apparently he is. Yeah, apparently he's clean. He's got them all. Whatever you do, they're all polished and everything now. But at the time, he had no idea what it was.
Nice.
Take some deep breaths.
So anyway, about this, maybe you guys this podcast, I like it. So you guys said we're saying at the beginning you're episode 39, 40, something like that.
42. This is why we're talking about life, life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Word. I like it. It's fancy here. Feel nice. I can stretch out.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. Fancy. We're going to do the podcast in our boxers.
So yeah,
that's cool.
That's a good segue. like tell us a little bit about Mind the Hive.
Yeah.
Like what give us your origin story.
Okay, so MineTheHive originally was created just to like for anyone who's like interested in like anything, alternative history or anything kind of offbeat, anything odd, enigmas, anyone that was really interested in like Ripley's Believe It or Not as a kid, kind of X-Files, kind of stuff like that, it's all that good stuff. We're still working on the website, trying to make it more of like a more community place, but we still got some fancy writings. I'll be in charge of like the podcast and doing videos and stuff like that once we get up and running some more, basically stuff around that.
Cool. Yeah, I freaking love the website. Like we've already read, I think like three of the articles on the podcast now. At this point, we've been talking about you guys to our listeners. So, yeah.
Oh well, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a great website. Like I freaking love it, and the articles are, they're very satisfying. Like my main problem with reading about stuff like this on the internet is there's never. It just doesn't seem like they really went out and tried to figure anything out. They just wrote down what everybody else says, and it's the same shit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just so that
Yeah.
just make like little lighthearted statements instead of like really digging in and getting to the juice of the matter. The beef.
Yeah.
Try to like explore all sides. What these guys saying? What these guys saying? What are the diehard facts? There are any? Because facts are more or less like kind of like subjective or relative, except for the real diehard facts,
Yeah.
things about laws, physics. But even then, you never know. Things can be broken, maybe.
That's
if
right.
Weird enigmas come into play, and that's where we like to play,
Exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. The website's fantastic. We already have you guys' logo up on our site linked to you because
Oh, I saw that. I was touched. I was like, oh man, it's legit.
it's legit. That's right. This is a legit partnership. We're serious about this shit. Yeah. So we're like just totally fucking excited about this whole deal. Like you guys are right in there with us in the like just the fascination with mystery in general. Like that's what I really think the whole thing is about, is like exploring the edges of the known to find, to add to it, but also to like, because like the edges of the known is where you really like you can learn about yourself there too. But I think that there's also
like paradoxes and all these crazy shits, and like the reason I guess like the mind the hive is called that is because like a hive mind mentality and digging into that, I guess, and harvesting nuggets.
right.
Trying to find the truth, the kernels to how we think as a collective consciousness, trying to mine the hive,
Yeah.
get the juice.
We were saying that like because the name of the podcast is Brothers of the Serpent, and so we were saying that like snakes are pretty good at this, minding the hive.
Oh yeah, I love snakes. I got myself a snake. He's my homie for life.
Yeah, I want to
die.
We need to do a combination logo with like a snake with a headlamp on, and then like the Mind the Hive logo.
Give him like a minor helmet.
That's right.
Lucius reference
What was up?
is the Brothers of the Serpents like a caduceus reference?
A caduceus. Oh yeah, it is in a way. The caduceus probably came from the Brotherhood. Like the Brotherhood of the Serpent is a real ancient secret. It's probably the first secret society. It was connected with Enki, who was like he was like the Sumerian like god figure who sort of was on mankind's side. So there was this.
He was one of the brothers he was the brother who liked humans, basically.
That's right, and he was like he started secretly. He was the Prometheus. Also, he was secretly feeding tech and knowledge to humans, like on the sly, because his brother Enlil, who was supposed to be Lord of the Earth, did not want humans to know that shit. So like that's why they called it the Brotherhood of the Serpent, because Enki was the serpent.
Yeah, I was unfamiliar with that. That's cool.
Yeah, like if you see references to it,
cool.
if you see references to it in like you can actually find references to it in archaeological literature talking about stuff that they have found that had been written by ancient peoples, and they called it the Sarmong Brotherhood.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
I always thought about like I'm a comic nerd, so I always thought like Hail Hydra. Brothers of the Serpent, Shout out to Marvel. Just throw up like a quick little tattoo. You're like, oh. But yeah, shout out to Infinity War coming out. I would say go see it. It's gonna be a great movie.
Which one is it?
Infinity War.
Oh, okay.
Infinity War.
Oh, okay.
That little Marvel plug advertisement.
Hey, what about Ready Player One?
Ready Player
Oh, that's gonna be a good one too. Is that already out?
Yeah, my buddy Ty just went and saw
that's
it.
true.
He said it was badass. So
Yeah, I'm slacking on
Ready
movies actually.
Player One.
I haven't seen
Dude.
what's that other movie?
I am so
Pacific Rim 2.
Yeah, I'm so slacked on movies.
Yeah.
Like the only thing I'll watch now is documentaries. Like, if I'm watching a totally fictional movie, I'm like, I'm wasting time. I could be learning about pyramids.
I guess I'm really, I don't know what the word is. I guess just like really petty with my money. I don't want to go and spend it at a movie theater
Yeah.
and shit. So, it's expensive. Man, fools have guns in movie theaters now. So it's like, come on.
just wait until it comes out on the dark web.
That's what Put for, bro. Pirate it. Just kill the party, bro.
That's right. Yeah, we have a theater system here, so like, why are we going to go to a theater when we have one at home? So
Yeah, exactly. I guess now it's more about the experience, because the ones out here, at least, they have reclining seats. You can get drinks and really nice food, so you can make it like a real nice going out experience for like a date.
yeah,
family
and
or
then
something like
popcorn
that.
gets thrown on you. People are kicking the back of your seat, and kids won't shut up, and somebody's texting
Yeah,
somebody.
that's true. That's still there.
It's the experience, man. You know what I'm saying?
That's great, though. Well, I really enjoyed doing this. I'm going to have to sadly peace out. I have a crazy schedule. I wake up at like 4 a.m.
Okay, yeah, no
Work
problem,
till
man.
like 3:30.
It's been a pleasure.
All right,
Yeah,
Mantis.
whenever we'll be staying in touch because I really enjoyed doing this and hope to hear back from you guys. And thank you for everyone to listening. And I'll see you guys in the future.
All right, we'll
right.
let you know when it's posted, bro.
All right, sounds good, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right, you guys take care.
All right,
Have a
you
good
too,
one.
brother. Later. Hey, Nemo, you still with us, bro?
Yeah, I'm still here, guys. What's up?
So I have a question. Were you taking like enormous bong hits? Because I could totally hear it. It was badass.
We were like,
Oh, dude, sorry.
No. Dude, it was fucking awesome. It was fucking awesome. I was like, this is Joe Rogan
it
right
so
here.
reminded me of the Joe Rogan podcast. I was like, oh shit, yes, we have bong hits on our podcast.
I was
Finally.
badass.
Yeah, I didn't know how sensitive your cameras were.
No,
You know
it
what
was
I'm saying?
not the cameras. It was totally audio.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. The cameras we have set up in your apartment totally picked it all up. Yeah.
Just teasing you guys. Anyway,
So has it been an enlightening experience being, on the SnakeBros?
dude, this is, it's pretty edifying, I would say.
Oh yeah.
I like it.
All right, badass. Well, hey,
I appreciate you guys having me on here and everything. I don't know. Are you guys trying to like check out of the show or what?
no. We're just gonna take one quick break, and I'm just gonna bump out real quick, and we will be back for the second half of the show. So you are totally. We want you to stay on if you want to stay on.
Yeah. If you don't want to, if you got to go, it's fine. But if you want to stay for it, bro. We'll be glad to have you.
Yeah, just hit me back up.
All right. Cool.
Snakes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We're here in the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, and we have our honored guests from MineTheHive. Mantis had to step out, but we still have Nemo here with us. So we're gonna keep on going, and Russ has got some impossible blocks to talk about.
Yeah.
We'll see where that leads us in episode 42, Life, the Universe, and Everything Plus Pyramids.
Yeah. Plus pyramids. This episode is the answer, guys. It is the answer
It is.
to life, the universe, and everything. So I've noticed, like, reading about ancient sites all over the world, that most of the ones that are in some way mysterious megalittically, if is that a word?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Megalittically, in other words, they're using enormous stoneworks. They're huge blocks that are very precisely laid, most of the time dry laid, so there's no mortar. The quarries will be found like in some cases extremely long distances away from the actual sites themselves,
and
like
over mountains and shit.
Yeah, over mountains, and there's no road, like no known roadway. But what's interesting is that in so many of these places, the quarries often have what are they're called unfinished or unused. Like, so in the case of Baalbek, there's the the Stone of the South, which it's an interesting name. Stone of the South, and then they have another one. I can never remember the Arabic name for it, but it means Stone of the Pregnant Woman. There's two of them, and of course the Germans that are everywhere have found another one underneath the Stone of the South. So when there was only the one known and it was sitting in the quarry, they thought it was. And you can still find this in some places on the internet, places that haven't updated, but they say that it's connected to the bedrock still. And that it was not used because there was a flaw in the block. Okay, well, obviously it's not connected to the bedrock because the Germans dug down and found that it's actually stacked on top of another enormous block. So it's not stuck. It's still stuck. But in the Aswan Quarry in Egypt, the place where they got the pink granite, which is like over 50% quartz, which may be why they used it, there is the unfinished obelisk. And that one also is said to have been left there because it developed a flaw or there was a crack or something like that.
And it is also the largest one.
Right. So
similar to the stones in the quarry at Baalbek.
Right. So the Stone of the South and the Stone of this Pregnant Woman and this other one the Germans have found are called the largest blocks ever cut by mankind. And they were obviously not taken to the Baalbek site, but the Baalbek site has 3 stones of the Trilithon that are very similar. They're enormous, but they're not quite as big as these ones from the quarry.
Yeah, just 200 tons smaller.
Right.
800 tons.
That's right. Well, and the one that they found beneath is said to be like 16 to 1,800 tons.
Jesus.
So it's almost...
Christ.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous amount of mass. And the other thing that the Germans said was they could tell by the way that they were cut that these blocks... They were like, these blocks were not intended to be finished on site after they were moved there. They were finished as they were.
Yeah.
They were intended to be used as they sit now. Like, in other words, whoever was going to transport them thought that they could transport them without doing any damage to the block itself. Now, so in modern times, if you're going to move an enormous block and you need to, and you want to take it somewhere, then lay it, they'll leave it sort of rough cut and then they'll move it because that'll chip, you can get it chipped or you can break stuff off of it or whatever, especially the corners. And then once you get it there, the masons will sort of finish the block out and then place it. Well, these blocks that are in the quarry at Baalbek are finished already.
Yeah, and that's the same case with the obelisk too.
That's right. The obelisk, yeah, and that obelisk, if it would have been finished, would have been like by far the largest obelisk ever that we know of. I mean, there may have been big ones that got destroyed, but this thing is like, I was just reading about it. They were saying 72 meters. Like, that's really tall.
72.
And it would have weighed, like 1,200 tons or something like that. So it's enormous. And like they were like, how would you even stand it up? So on Easter Island, the moai were quarried out of the volcanic rock on the inside of the caldera of the volcano that's there. And just like everywhere else, there is an enormous, it is at least 1/3 larger than any of the largest moai. This humongous moai still in the quarry spot, but his face is carved and the body is carved, but it's still attached to the rock. And they're like, well, there was a flaw, so they didn't do. It's the same thing said about. So at Göbekli Tepe, now these aren't as enormous as what we're talking about, but there is the same deal. There is a T pillar there in the quarry. It's the biggest one that we've ever found. It was apparently never transported to the site, and it also is said to have a flaw, quote unquote. So that, this is the excuse, I think, that they're like they didn't use it because they found it had a crack in it and they left it there. And I'm like, well, why is it always the biggest one ever? Like that how come there aren't anywhere where you find it and it's left in there and it's just kind of like a medium-sized T-pillar and it's got a flaw in it? Like, why is it always the most largest thing that they ever did? So there's the same thing at there's a quarry in China called the Yangshan Quarry. It's a very ancient quarry. It has enormous, we actually talked about this a couple of shows ago. It's got these enormous stoneworks in there that were said to be somebody ordered they wanted a stele built that said that they were badass or whatever. So like they were going to make this stele, and it had 3 parts. But when you look at the actual core, you're like, wait, those are parts of something. I mean, the part that was supposed to be the very top of the thing is humongous. It's the size of a large house, like a 4-bedroom, 2-story house. It's this humongous thing of like granite, and you're like, wait, they were going to lift that on top of those other things? Like, it's ridiculous. The story is that they were going to build the stele, and they cut them almost all the way complete with all the forms and everything on them. They're like, wait, these are too big. Let's make something smaller. And then you look at the stele that's actually there that they actually erected, and you're like, that's way smaller. That's like way fucking smaller than these things.
Yeah.
So I think that there's something else happening here. Like, why do these ancient sites all over the world, and they're always the mysterious ones where we don't quite understand who was doing it or how, there's something else happening here. Like, this is either a statement by these ancient people. Like, I kind of think of the whole idea of like there were certain ancient people that when they would go to make a work of art, like a painting or like a tapestry or a rug or whatever, they would purposefully include a flaw into the work of art.
Sorry, not to try to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, man.
But I'm gonna have to take off now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool, man.
It's been great being on here, and thank you for everything.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah, man. Thank you guys
out there. And, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you
it's
so
been a
much for
pleasure.
coming on. We loved it. It was fun.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Bye.
Yeah, so that they would include a flaw in the works of art that they were working on, and that to me is, if these really have flaws in them, maybe there's something similar happening here. But there are other ideas. Like I'm not really on board with that one 100%. That's a possibility. But another possibility that you and I have talked about is that maybe it was kind of like the whole breaking the records thing. Like they were whoever was doing all these ancient megalithic sites were getting better and better at moving enormous amounts of weight. And it just so happens that all over the world they were, it'd be a singular culture. All over the world they were like getting better and better at it, and they were preparing to do even more of it. And then some global catastrophic thing happened and stopped work all at once.
So just trying to think about it in a new way, like when you started off, like what occurred to me was that I think it was when you got to the point of talking about the moai. I remember seeing that moai, and it looks so similar to the way the obelisk in Egypt was cut out. Like the tunnels,
scoops.
These tunnels that go down and underneath it and everything.
Yeah, and it's all scooped weird. It looks like they were using a giant spoon.
It's real smooth.
Yeah.
All the walls are real smooth. And so it occurred to me that maybe this was there were two things. It's like they're doing it on purpose so that you can see, like, they're showing a method.
Yeah.
Right? Like that it was intended that the quarry be known as well, so that we could see, like, for example, in Baalbek, like there were no roads.
Right.
So it's like whoever was building this intended for it to be
associated with the site itself,
and way in the future.
Right. Okay. Right? Yeah. So they're thinking like
it was a message to. It's like when we build something today, we put a plaque on the cornerstone or whatever that says some shit that tell you about it. But what they were doing was a different type of method that was like, look, this is our masonry signature. We leave one piece in the quarry and show the method of how we did it, because they're not just rough cut. They actually carve the whole thing. The other idea that occurred to me was that maybe the large ones were, and really not in the case of Baalbek, but in the case of the
obelisk,
possibly the T-pillar, but the obelisk and the Moai statue, was that they were proofs of concept, right? Like they go ahead and they make it real big, or it doesn't matter what size, because they're never planning to stand it up. They're just like they're cutting it, and they're like, yes, this is what we want. These are the proportions. This method's going to work.
Okay. I did find it really strange that the Moai has a face and a body. Like, in other words, he looks just like a Moai.
Right.
Like they finished him still attached to the stone. I always thought that was weird. I'm like, that doesn't look like where they were kind of just cutting a piece of stone out and they were like, well, yeah, this got a crack in it, guys, stop. No,
Right.
they completely carved the face into it and everything.
Right.
No.
But it does seem that it would be easier in the case of the Moai to do that carving while it's laying down than to like carve out a massive chunk of stone, stand it up, and then try to do it where you have to get way up high, where instead you can just walk on the front of it.
Yeah.
Or whatever your machine is that you're using. I don't know what they're
Or
using.
if you just get it out of the hole, then you carve it laying down or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'm just saying that like it was odd to me, but I can see what you're saying. Like if
But
if
in
every
the-
other Moai you made didn't have a flaw and didn't have to be abandoned, then that might be part of how you want to do it.
But at the same time, like, I'm not considering the flaw idea. I think that may be like what you were suggesting.
They're just
before, that
guessing.
It's just
Yeah.
So it does kind of make sense. Like I've tried to make arrowheads before. You know, I've worked on flint napping and stuff, and you know, you'll be working on a piece and you're getting it thinner and thinner and smaller as you work it, and like. There's this weird thing where it's like the better it starts to get,
The less you wanna screw it up.
more scary it gets to work on, right?
Yeah.
And then you're working on one side of it or whatever, and then the whole thing just splits in half because you hit it wrong at some place. And the main reason for that has to do with how you're supporting the piece in your other hand. When you're doing not pressure flaking, but percussion flaking, right?
Yeah.
Where you're hitting it with another rock. So there's this, you know, and I haven't quite figured it all out just right yet, where like I'll be working on a piece and then bam, I just break the tip off. I was like, dang it.
Yeah.
So thinking of the Moai, like you're going to carve that face and all that kind of stuff into it, and you've got to put a lot of percussive pressure onto the form. So it might be wise to do all of that before you cut it out underneath.
Yeah.
So that it's fully supported in the bedrock or whatever.
That's true. Yeah, I think that's I hadn't considered that they were doing trials, but that's definitely but okay. So here's my thing with that. These sites are all quarries, so they were. It wasn't like it wasn't quite like flaking a flint arrowhead because they've been cutting enormous amounts of stone out of this quarry to do a bunch of other stuff too.
Right, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, like you kind of get the idea, but.
No, all I meant was that maybe the specific carving on the front of the stone is, if it was completely cut out, there would be a higher risk of breaking the stone in two based on the style of which they were carving out the face. So
I got you.
So they do it while it's still connected to the bedrock. They get the whole face carved in, the main part of it. Then they cut the stone out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Brett, that's right. I'm sorry, I'm telling Brett about the quarries. That's all right. And then there's also one at Göbekli Tepe, but I don't know what that's called, and it may not be.
Just look up Göbekli Tepe quarry.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and there's other ones that I'm not remembering right now too. But yeah, so the idea that these are kind of all over the place, I started to think of them as being. This is like I think we can consider these to be a flag or a marker. This indicates that this is the same culture, and they are kind of the lost civilization we've been talking about. Like, because really the Baalbek stuff, because there's like 3 blocks, and one of them was in the process of being moved, and it was kind of dropped in between the quarry and that really indicates to me that like something happened that made everybody down tools and never come back, right?
Yeah, in the case of Baalbek, it's different than the other two there's a bunch, but the ones where they're still connected.
Yeah. But it looks the same to me. Like it looks the same in the sense that, like, for one thing, why is it always the biggest? Like, these are the most enormous ones, you know? And so, like, yes, at Baalbek, at least the Stone of the South is no longer connected. Now, the one underneath it that's not named yet, I don't know if that might still be connected to the bedrock. I have no idea. But because they've only uncovered the top of it, or at least that's all I've seen so far. But it just, there's so many similarities with the idea that I'm kind of thinking that at the very least we can consider this to be like an indication that this was pre-deluge, like this was catastrophic event, whatever. Like, okay, so there's also, I don't know if there's a, wait, I have read that there's, okay, so the Ollantaytambo site in Peru, which is associated with Cusco, right? It's that weird wall they call the Temple of the Sun. It's not really a temple. It's a strange wall that looks, and it has those wedges shoved in between the big blocks. You know what I'm talking about?
Tiny little slivers of...
Yeah, so the quarry for that place was on the opposing mountain. Like there's a valley. Like this was basically on this incredibly steep mountainous slope, and it goes down like a kilometer to a river, and then it comes back up on the other side of the valley, just as steep, and the quarry's right there. So it's really close to the site, but you have to go all the way down to the water and then go all the way back up, right? There are numerous blocks that are enormous, that are like strewn all down the mountainside, but that you could tell that they were in the process of being moved. Some of them are all the way down in the river. Some of them across the river, and they were on their way up. Right? They're called tired or sleeping stones. Like the idea the natives have is like they got tired and they just like the stones laid down and went to sleep and never got up. Right? Sleeping stones. They're all over the place. But that's another indication to me that like something happened that made everybody stop working. And then those guys who were doing that never came back. But later, somebody did come back and do a lot of work on that site and add a bunch of shit, but they never used any of those freaking blocks. Why is that? Like,
how do they know? Well, I was going to say, how do they know it was later? How are they dating it? Like,
oh, well, actually, they don't say that it was later. I'm saying it was later because you can clearly see from the style of whoever came back and added shit was not those guys, right?
But they couldn't. They might have used stones off the mountainside, but we wouldn't know because they're not on the mountainside anymore.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. So if they completely chopped one up, like so at Baalbek, the stone that's like sort of halfway in between, you can tell that somebody quarried that thing later on. There's little
chunks
there's
sticking out of it.
Square pieces chopped off of the top of it, right? So you can tell that somebody at some point decided to use that block as a quarry, right?
Right.
Okay. So I was thinking that like we don't see anything like that with the Ollantaytambo site.
Okay, so you weren't saying that these were the new stones that were put up or the same size. They're actually small stones.
Yeah, they're very small.
Okay,
yeah.
I got you.
It looks to me like in most of the Inca stuff that you're looking at three stages of and styles and abilities of stonework. And of course, the most ancient shit is these enormous, like polished, perfect cut blocks that have these sharp edges and shit. And those are the sleeping stones all over the place. And then there's another level which is still really good, but it isn't. It's more on the level of what you might see in Europe, what they called Cyclopean construction in Europe. That was ancient, right? And it was like it has the puzzle piece shape, right? That's called Cyclopean. So like but those blocks just aren't as big as these enormous ashlars that were being cut in the oldest period of building. And then the most recent stuff is like little boulders that aren't even cut. They're just like stacked around, Yeah. So to me, that's clearly three stages of work. You see the same thing in Cusco itself. There are enormous blocks down at the bottom of everything, and then there's this like beautiful, brilliant sort of Cyclopean, heterogeneous construction above that, and then there's like the terrible Spanish and Inca stuff on top of that, right?
Right.
Now, you're right. They could have quarried some of the sleeping stones. I hadn't considered that they just quarried it completely gone. Right. That's totally possible. Yeah. So that's a good point. But there aren't any that are kind of cut into and then stopped, which that doesn't really point anything out. But it is
still they would have if they weren't capable of moving stones that large, they would have had to go down the hill and quarry a stone. So you should probably see like some leftover pieces that were quarried.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Is that like so one of the big arguments against the Romans having anything to do with the platform at Baalbek is that because if the mainstream archaeologists are correct and the Romans built everything there, then why did they leave these blocks in the quarry instead of cutting them up into smaller ones and using them to build everything? Because that was the foundation, and they still had a temple to build. And like the idea that they just were like, yeah, put it down.
Yeah, their excuse is that, well, it was just too big, so they left it there. And it's like, no, if it was too big, they would have cut it in half and taken the two halves.
Right, or something. Like they would have cut it down and used it because it was already quarried and out of the, Right. So the idea that, to me, that just completely blows out of the water, the idea that the Romans had anything to do with the platform, because that's the first thing you have to build. And they certainly would have known about those blocks blocks if they had been building the platform, and they would have just cut them down to use them because they were good stone, right?
Or if they had known about those blocks, we wouldn't be seeing those blocks there today.
Right.
Because they did obviously build a lot of serious shit there.
That's right, yeah.
So one of the ideas is that it's possible that those blocks were actually buried in sediment.
In sediment, right.
When the Romans were there, right. Yeah, of course.
What filled that quarry with sediment, and what else is still down in there? I mean, they've known about the stone of the south for a long time, like hundreds and hundreds of years. And the Germans showed up and like were digging around it, and they find this like even bigger block below it. Like, so that makes me ask, like, how deep is that quarry? Right. How much stuff is still down in there?
Is it a quarry?
Right. Yeah.
Or was it being quarried later because it was actually another building that looked like the wall at Baalbek?
Oh, I see what yeah, that's totally possible too. Like that, or those blocks may actually have been on Baalbek, and the enormous wave that came past dropped them in that hole, you know?
Holy shit.
I mean, like, because like, at least when you read Sitchin, like, and he's talking about the site, aside from his idea about rockets or whatever, his concept of what was going on there like with the initial construction is like, I find it to be like the most likely, because if you look just at the weathering of those blocks, they're totally different from anything above them, right? You see these foundation blocks, these enormous, and they are heavily weathered, right? But they're so precisely laid with each other that you know they must have been polished. But you look at them now, and they're deeply pitted, right? And that can't have been their finished face, because you can't precisely lay something with that
deeply pitted,
right? So how long does it take to deeply pit that kind of stone, and like what could have done it? Because it's very even on all sides of it. So that implies some kind of like massive waterwork, right? Like some kind of erosion of like enormous amounts of water that's it basically immersed the block, because it's flowing all around it constantly or something. Because there's no sort of like there's no direction indicated or whatever. It just looks like these blocks have been heavily eroded from all directions, very evenly, and that's an indication to me that like something massive happened. And then it was when they finally came back and were reusing the site, somebody was like, holy shit, look, part of it's still here, right? That was basically what Sitchin was saying, was that the Anunnaki came back and they were like, so a piece of this original site's left because the blocks were so big.
Yeah.
So that's the wall that is sort of the retaining wall that has the trilithon on it. But what it was before that, we don't know, right? But they decided to build a new site around it. But it was lesser than the original because they were lesser at that point, right? They had been on Earth for a long freaking time, and they were just not as good as they were originally because they were in a hole instead of up in space. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true. It could have all been just humans, not, no Anunnaki necessary. But they were still losing, and you can see it on all these sites, that there's like 3 stages of construction. There's a guy from Peru. Him and his father and him have like looked at these sites all over Peru for almost 100 years total. Like his dad was doing it for a long time, and he's been doing it for a long time. I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. But they had names for these 3 different stages, and the oldest one they called Hanan Pacha, right?
Yeah.
And like I was working with these guys a little bit on Facebook, like when I was involved in those groups, and we were basically trying to catalog like these types of sites all around the world, where there is like 3 distinct phases of construction, where the deepest one is always the most enormous. The second one is like this beautiful cyclopean shit, and then the third one is like the most modern and the worst, And in Japan they have it. Like that was my best contribution to their work, because I was like, have you guys looked at the palaces in Japan? Because like, holy crap, that's exactly what you're talking about. And they have these humongous blocks at the bottom that are just, they're just like unbelievably enormous. And then there's this gorgeous cyclopean stuff on top of that, and then anything modern or like relatively modern is just, it just doesn't even, you can hardly call it construction when you look at it compared to that other stuff. You're just like, those guys are amateurs.
Yeah. So could it, it seems feasible that it could have been part of the method of building of one culture, that they built these massive blocks at the bottom and then the beautiful cyclopean architecture on top.
Yeah.
Because like we would build...
But the style of the cyclopean stuff is very different. Like I'm not arguing that whoever was doing that the
Like
enormous
my
stuff,
point is that the foundation of whatever they're doing, they wanted to be these massive stones, and there's like, there's a certain guild that's what they do.
Yeah.
And they put in the massive foundation stones all over, and then the guild that does that other shit comes in and they start doing their shit on top of that.
Yeah, that's
There would be clear demarcation, I guess, where I don't know if that's the right word.
no, that's the right way.
Where the bottom stones are all on a level,
Yeah.
depending on the foundation, the necessities of the foundation of the
Yes.
structure, and then this stuff would be on top.
So the only thing that and I can only think of Baalbek as being an indication of this, but the Cyclopean stuff at Baalbek is just not heavily weathered like the big stuff at the bottom.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So that to me kind of looks like this stuff is much newer. It's still way older than the stuff at the very
Yeah.
top. But the weathering of the enormous ashlars, which is ashlar just means an enormous rectangular stone, right? So the guys that were doing the Cyclopean stuff were not using ashlars. They made all shapes and sizes of stuff. Their work is at Baalbek on top of the foundation, but it doesn't have the heavy weathering of the enormous stuff at the bottom. So that to me has always looked like not just three stages, but three very different
time
periods.
periods.
Yeah. The stuff at the very top, which is obviously the newest stuff, is also the most, if it's been cut at all, a lot of times it's just rubble stacked because people were they've been using it as a fort for, in battles for years. They would go in and just jam rocks everywhere or whatever. But I think in Japan you can kind of see the same stuff too. The most weathered stones are the big ashlars, but there's not as sharp of a demarcation like you were saying in terms of weathering between the Cyclopean stuff. Now, so if you think of Sacsayhuaman, that site is all Cyclopean. There's no ashlars there, at least not in the walls, right? So those guys were capable of moving enormous stones, but their style is so vastly different from this sort of very rectangular. So this is okay. Basically, what I'm getting at here is my idea, and I have no attachment to this. This is just what I've been thinking, just based on what I've seen and what I've read about it. Is that so? Graham Hancock has this idea of survivors of this culture then teaching people, right? So. Yeah. What if the Hananpacha stuff, these enormous ashlars, are the actual work of the civilization that got destroyed before it was destroyed? Then the Cyclopean stuff is the result of the few survivors teaching various various indigenous peoples how to do it, but they never quite got as good because they were just taught by these few survivors, and then those guys died or whatever, right? So they were good, but they just never quite reached the level of the original civilization.
Right, or maybe they had lost some of the technology that enabled them to move.
Or the guys who were teaching them were just apprentices of the original civilization, didn't know all the tricks of the trade, right? Or they weren't able to pass them all on or whatever. So there's some loss of knowledge there, but there's a continuity of a sort, and you can see that too. You can see this is what's so confusing about it. There is a continuity of ability and just, I guess, I never really put this into words before, but it's just sort of like what you're when you're going to go build something, there's a sort of a way you go about it, right? There's a sort of a mindset, and then there's a way that you execute everything, and you can see a continuity of that in between the two styles and eras, right? But it's not enough to say that it's the same people. It looks too different for that, but there's somewhat of a continuity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like.
That's kind of what he was going at with the whole fingerprints idea.
Yes,
like you're seeing a remnant of the knowledge of this previous culture that was able to do this other shit, right? Because some of that was passed along.
Yeah,
but it's not the same. It's clearly different,
right?
But it has roots in the same stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
So, I know you're reading Brett's.
The geopolymer stuff, like I've never been able to be totally on board with that, like as an explanation, because if it was used, it doesn't look like it was used enough. Like in other words, like the big geopolymer push was basically with the pyramid, like the Great Pyramid, and they went and did a bunch of tests on a bunch of the various blocks. Some of them do have the chaos inside. Like in other words, if you geopolymer stuff, you're basically crushing the limestone and then mixing it into something, then adding something that will cause it to reform, so that you can just pour it into shape wherever, right? but too many of the blocks had obvious microscopic stratification. In other words, it was sediment that had been
was cut out of
and then it was cut out
ground.
and out of the ground and then added. Now, some of them were chaotic; they didn't have the sedimentation, but that could be.
But look, so the vitrification that you're bringing up, Brett.
That's
now
totally different.
we were just talking on the episode before about the burn papers, right?
Yes.
That fire that burned up 10% of the biomass was hot enough to make diamonds and melt glass into like to
melt quartz.
To melt quartz.
Yeah. The impact, yes.
So I seem to recall, and I don't quote me on this, but that they found this vitrification, but it was only on the outside.
That's right.
There was like a thin layer of vitrification on the outside of like some of the blocks at Sacsayhuaman.
Yes.
But the interior
Is not vitrified.
still had the microscopic fossils and stratification and all that kind of stuff in them.
The fossils
right?
the fossils would be in a geopolymer, but it would be chaotic because you just mix it up and pour
Well,
it.
no. One of the things they say about the fossils is that they're crushed, right? So they're
Oh yeah.
you might find some diatoms that are whole in there, but
Yeah.
But as far as the larger fossils, like
Right, the
any of
larger ones, yeah.
any of the little shells and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
they would be all crushed into pieces. So you would find fossils, but they would just be tiny like fragments of broken pieces that were crushed into the powder.
Yeah, and there would definitely never be any large ones.
But there were definitely some large ones in there,
Right.
and even some small but larger than powder.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and even if you didn't powderize the material, like if you were just kind of like crushing it a little bit, but there was enough to where there was like little shells, it would just be chaotic. Like the deposition would be gone, the deposit,
You can't really get a strong bond to happen if you don't have an extremely fine material.
That's true. Yeah,
So you need that bond.
but what if they were using sound and like space glue? So what you've posted there is, Brett, is a picture from the... Yeah, see, I disagree with that. Okay, so he's posted a picture from Yangshan Quarry in China. That thing is the thing I was talking about that they were supposed to put on the top of the stele, okay? That was the head of it, okay? That enormous thing was going to be lifted all the way to the top. In the picture that he's posted, there's a thing that says geopolymer protrusions, and there's arrows pointing to these like knobs that are sticking out of it. And those knobs are seen all over the world that are always associated with the same type of masonry that is just enormous. Like, I disagree that those knobs mean it was geopolymer. Like, some people think that they're injection ports. That's why they think they're there. And I'm just like, okay, that's a good idea, but you can't state it as fact. So they could be injection ports, but I don't know. I've seen other interesting things about those. So there's another thing, and I think it's on the back of that particular block or rock or whatever, that shows, what do they call it? It has to do with like if you're trying to pour an enormous amount of concrete. So like what we did at the Hoover Dam, right? They were pouring enormous amounts of concrete that were incredibly deep. So they had this problem of like stratification that would build up in the concrete itself, and so they would put these enormous poles down in there and then vibrate them to make everything kind of right. And on one of those, they're showing you that on the back you could see these sort of layers, and I'm just like, well, that to me looks like it's natural. Like, why would you assume that means it was poured? Like, it's still attached to the freaking stone there, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think the geopolymer people have interesting ideas, but like that's a bad example because it's still attached to the native rock. So the idea that that's geopolymer is just kind of weird.
But I mean, couldn't they, if they had some type of geopolymer that really fused it to be so similar to natural rock, couldn't they just pour it right on top of the natural rock?
Yeah. And then it would stick to it, you mean?
It's just the polymer, like whatever they're doing, it just fuses to the surface of the rock.
Yeah, absolutely.
They poured it on.
Yeah. Yeah, they could do that. So you're saying that like that means that this could be poured, it just stuck to the natural rock because they intended it to be there?
Yeah, they cleared off the bedrock and then they poured it there, and because this whole idea that that's going to be a piece that you're going to set on top of something else was wrong.
Yeah, the other two pieces of whatever it is are also in there in that quarry. You know, there's a really long thing that was supposed to be they said was going to be the main part of the stele, and then there's a base. But I agree with you that those probably were not intended to be the stele that is now in the square of the city. Like that's not what it was, and I think it's way older than the city itself.
Yeah, so Brett's talking about like they had like a seamless binding agent that it would look identical to stone, basically liquid granite.
Yeah. So the granite is abyssal, which basically means it's like it would be called igneous, like volcanic rock, like lava comes out and forms stone, but like basalt, granite must form from lava still deep underground and under a lot of pressure. So it's like lava that cools before it ever gets to the surface.
Right. So they would have to have some type of
High pressure. I mean, you gotta have pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, which you could do with waves. I mean, technically.
Yeah.
That's how they make, like, I was talking to Archer just recently about sonoluminescence. And, like, they take a little bubble in a glass of water. This bubbles, you can suspend the bubble in there with sound waves and then create basically a standing wave right around that bubble that holds the bubble where it is and doesn't allow it to float to the surface and just starts collapsing it over and over again.
Yeah, crushing
the bubble, and then it lights up like a freaking star.
Right. Yeah, it becomes very bright. Yeah, so those could be geopolymer. I'm not sure because I don't know. Like maybe they thought their injection ports looked cool, and so they left them on the stones all the time.
Yeah, I know,
but that's my main problem with it is like, they're like, these are well, okay, it's a better idea than the mainstream archaeologists who say that those were lifting eyes, basically.
Yeah.
Now those protrude a lot, but still they have sloped, they're not going to be good for picking it up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like you can't get anything around that's going to stay. And like most of them, when you look at them around the world, like, okay, so there's a lot of these at the very base of the third pyramid on Giza. There is a granite, like a black granite, what would have been a casing stone wall of the Cyclopean type of architecture. It looks like it came straight from Peru, right? It's made of this black granite shit, and it has these protrusions on it. I was looking at the Osirian.
Yeah.
Okay, the Osirian has it has the same problem. You've got these enormous, very square, very like sort of Spartan, gigantic ashlars that make up the bulk of the structure itself. Very Stonehenge-y, like the hinges or whatever. But then if you look at there's kind of an exterior wall, and the exterior wall has been layered or sheathed in this black granite that has protrusions. It looks like it came from Peru.
Yeah.
Those to me, those just like look like completely different styles of construction, but that there is some continuity of ability and technique there. So
Yeah.
So I've started to consider this. Basically, my main idea here is that I've gotten intrigued on this idea that there are these ancient sites all over the world that are quarries that are associated with some site that we don't fully understand. There's mysteries and questions about them, not just who built them or whatever, but also when and like why are they like aligned, and then like how did they move or stack or do this type of construction. And the quarries all seem to have these very noticeable, larger than anything else used in the known site thing, whatever it may be, whether it's a statue or it's a block or it's a obelisk or a T-pillar, but it's something that like you clearly associate with the site itself, but it's left in the quarry, is bigger than whatever they used, and it's said to be flawed. Now that may be fake news. I don't know if that's real. That may be a wrong data point that it isn't real. There's people were. So I know that. Okay, so I know that the obelisk itself has cracks in it, but that
doesn't mean that. Yeah,
it was cracked when they were cutting it out. Right? Those could have formed at any point because the obelisk is almost completely removed from the stone.
Right.
Right. They whoever was cutting it out went down the sides and then under it to leave only a thin ribbon of material at the very bottom. So the cracks could have formed at any time in the 12,000 years since they'd cut that shit.
Yeah.
Or maybe it formed right after they stopped working on it because of the cataclysm that happened that made everybody stop working, So, yeah. The idea of there being a flaw inherent in the stone itself is like, that doesn't look the same as these cracks. Now, I was watching this this video that kind of talked about this in a little bit, and they were showing all these other cracks that are in structures. Okay, that was interesting too. Like so there's this enormous crack that goes through the subterranean chamber. I'm sorry. Are you indicating that we are going over time here? Is that what you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I thought we were just going to go for the whole hour. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Go for it.
Yeah.
We're already at 10 minutes over, so just go for it.
Yeah. So the subterranean chamber beneath the Great Pyramid has an enormous crack in the stone itself. Now nobody built that. They cut it out of the rock, right? But there's this huge crack that goes through it. There's a couple of that they were pointing out. It was like that. So these ancient sites also have enormous cracks in them.
Well, I thought the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid has this huge crack that runs through multiple.
You're right. There's a big
stones
crack
in the granite.
Yeah, that's right. And it actually comes down. It's what's interesting about that, and they were just pointing this out in that video that I was watching. The crack comes down and is associated or very close to the side of the sarcophagus thing that's also broken.
Off,
yeah. I guess that's in the pyramid code, right?
Yeah. So in the pyramid code, there's the one they show another one that it's huge, and they're like the amount of force it would have taken to crack this freaking stone that was actually cut.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way through, and then it goes through a couple of other stones or whatever. It's
it would have taken a lot of force. So I guess there's a lot of different things that you can see from this information, but like I definitely see like hints of some catastrophic thing that happened that was global, because these sites are all over the world, and like it looks like people. What?
So you're not really going on the idea that this was intended in any way. It's more or less a signature of the cataclysm that came. So that all these sites that you've been talking about that have this phenomenon are basically the building process, or the process of them being dug out at the time was right at the time that this cataclysm happened all over the world with all of these sites.
Well, no, that's close, but like I think that there's the fact that they're always the biggest is kind of too much to. You know what I mean?
So I was leaning more towards this is a signature of some type.
Yeah, and I mean that in multiple ways. It's like we can view it as this is a signature that of like this kind of site that because the quarry associated with this structure over here has this thing in it, this biggest block or whatever. That means that we're looking at the same culture that did all these other ones.
Okay, I meant a signature in terms of like this was a practice of the builders.
It may have been that.
Like
that's what I mean.
They dig a quarry out and then they leave this. So let's just say that. Let's say we find a quarry, and archaeologists find a quarry somewhere. There's no structure anywhere that they know of.
Yeah.
But they're like, holy shit, there's this massive quarry here. And they start excavating the quarry, and then they find this huge freaking carving that's like almost removed. And it has this particular look to it.
Yeah.
Well, then you could say that means there's a site somewhere nearby, maybe over that mountain, maybe 500 miles in that direction towards the coast, that is built out of things that look like this.
Right. Yes.
That was what I meant by a signature. This is something that the masons who are doing the job, they mark the quarry to match the site, and they leave that there. It's the biggest one. But it was never intended.
I see.
To be removed. It was made to be the signature of that site and the builders.
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
That's definitely a good possibility. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Like, I guess because I've been thinking of quarries like the way we use them now. There's no quarry that's associated with a particular site. Like like the way we use quarries is like they're cutting stone out, and if you need stone, you go buy it.
Right, exactly.
Right? Like,
I was going to ask you, do you know because Stonehenge has this quarry of the blue granite or whatever it is, and there's like 500 miles away.
Yeah, I think and there is a stone there that's left.
Okay, that's
yeah. They found it in Wales, like really far away, and it's like and they call it the blue granite, and there's a big one that they left there, and like so yes, it could be just what you said, that the intention was to leave it there and to make it enormous, so it's like whatever, it's easy to find, like like somebody who like signs their paintings, but it's like they've got this enormous John Hancock signature, like right. And they do it exactly the same way as whatever signature stone that they were using to build, so that you could either, if you found the quarry, you'd be able to associate it with the site, or if you found the site, you'd be able to associate the quarry with it, right? you could match them up, basically. Is that that's what you're talking
Yes,
about? Yeah.
yes.
Or if you just found the quarry, you would say, okay, so now we know that there's a site around here somewhere, maybe kind of far away. But
Right.
if we don't know of a site that's using that particular thing that's cut out of this quarry, then we need to find it because it
Right.
exists. Yeah.
It's going to be there somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's definitely a good idea. It's I've been looking at it as like this was a global culture and they were all over the world doing all this work at the same time, and then something enormous and cataclysmic.
That's what I was asking. That's what I meant to be asking the first time when I was saying, are you going in this direction with this or this other direction? Like,
Right.
I see. Okay, so
But-
you are thinking a bit more in terms of like,
Yeah.
it was not on purpose.
Well, that's how I've been thinking about it. But the reason I wanted to talk about it on the show is because the fact that they're all the biggest kind of makes me think that can't be right.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Like, there's something. So what led me down that road was that maybe the big. Okay, it's like.
Yeah.
I know this doesn't really work really well when you're cutting stone, but if cutting stone is easy for you,
Yeah.
then you might just say, well, let's cut like a huge thing that's like sort of a trial of like the target. This is what we're going for. And maybe they have ways of testing. They start cutting underneath it and they're like checking it all out, and then they get its mass or something after they kind of
Yeah.
get it figured out, and then they're like, okay, we can do this. But it's weird that they're all bigger. It doesn't really work.
It's also strange that would be the first one, because when you're quarrying, you're taking the material out, and like
Yeah.
this is all like, so if there's
These
something
things
left,
are always way down in the middle of it.
It's like this is the last thing that they were cutting, because because everything else that they were cutting is gone, and the
Yeah.
quarry itself is a hole that was left from all the removal.
Okay, now that would be an interesting line of study, like looking at, for example, the obelisk in the quarry wherever in Egypt.
Yeah.
Give me the whole freaking aerial of the entire quarry. Where was most of the bulk of the stone? Where is the obelisk located? How deep was the original surface level? Is it on the edge?
So that looks like because I've looked at it with Google Earth, it looks like that used to be an enormous protrusion, because it's actually above level grade all around it, the granite itself. And so you see this kind of flat where they had been cutting blocks out all over the place, and then there's this huge long hole where the obelisk is like down in the, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, the quarry itself is not a deep pit because they were cutting it from some enormous protrusion.
Right. Okay. So it's coming. They're cutting down.
Yeah.
Is the massive obelisk on the edge? Is it?
It's almost
in the
right
center?
in the middle. It's almost right in the
Okay.
middle.
Yeah. So it can't be.
Yeah, it can't be the first one they cut. Yeah.
But it could have been like, okay, we're done with this quarry.
Yeah.
Carve the massive one in there and then leave.
Yeah, it could be that for sure. And it's interesting because you see the sort of signature scooping, like, and I've thought about that. I'm like, well, if it's 12,000 years old, it may not have looked like that initially.
Yeah, maybe not.
Like it's been worn and smooth, and now it was
Except the obelisk is not.
right. The obelisk still has sharp edges, which is weird. But granite takes a long time to wear down.
But how can the things they're digging be
Yeah.
smooth and the edges
Yeah.
of the
You're right.
obelisk not? It's like,
Yeah. So you're right.
dude, Brett just found some really cool shit though.
Yes, yeah. So granite is a natural source of radon radiation. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. But some granites have been reported to have higher radioactivity. Yes, I didn't know.
Thereby raising concerns about their safety.
Citation
Granite is not safe.
He put the citation needed.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Like the whole.
That's great. Yes, the Aswan. That's what I was saying. The Aswan granite, the pink granite there is like more than 50% quartz, which is, some people think that's why they were using it.
But like the whole King's Chamber is like all granite.
Yeah.
The whole, I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Radio.
Okay, so those big, what were we talking about with those big weird like bowls with the holes in the side?
Yeah, the quartz bowls.
Yeah, those are solid
Egypt.
quartz, like 100% solid quartz. Like
Yeah.
those are. You know what I thought of when I was looking at those? Because you were talking about how like we'd put a grease fitting.
He's
on
talking
there.
about in Egypt there are these big bowls. They're off away from the. They're in Giza.
Yeah, they're on Giza, but they found them all over the place.
Yeah, and they took a bunch of them out and lined them up. Maybe we can put a picture of this in the show notes. But
Yeah.
they're all these big square white quartz bowls, and they have like these weird knobs all the way around the bowl that they're equidistant. They look like almost like gear cogs.
Yeah.
And then there's a hole bored through the side of the outside of the bowl to the inside of the bowl.
Yeah, the outside of the bowl is square like a block.
Yeah, it's like
but
a
there's
cube.
this like this deep cut or cup cut out of the inside, so it makes it look like a bowl. Yeah, and then there's the weird gear marks.
But it's like it's like cube shaped on the outside with the bowl on the top, and then the little gear marks around the top of the rim of the bowl.
Yeah,
and then this huge pour in there. Anyway,
and it's made of solid quartz, which is like that's really difficult to work with because it's a crystal. It doesn't want to cut in certain ways, right? But what's it like? I was looking at it and thinking about what you said about how if that was a piece of machinery, like a piece of metal, we would put a grease fitting on that hole, and that's how we would inject the lubricant. Yeah. And I thought of like, so have you ever been to the Natural History Museum in Houston? Have you ever gone there?
I can't remember. I don't
Okay,
know.
there's an enormous natural history museum in Houston, and the thing
we need to go there.
Yeah, it's badass. It's like amazing. But the thing that they have out in front, like when you're coming up to it, like you walk up and there's like they got all the marble steps and everything, and there's a big sort of like a plaza thing in front of the doors.
Yeah.
They have a fountain there, and it's basically just a circle. It's real simple. There's a circle, and there's this enormous granite sphere that's highly polished.
They have one
And
at St. Peter's Museum.
And it rolls in place, and it's like floating on like a little water pump, right? The water pump is pushing water up from the bottom, and the granite sphere is just like...
Yeah.
That's what I thought of when I looked at those. I was
At the Vatican Museum, they have one, like in the big square, like... Not in St.
Did
Peter's
they carve
Square.
the lines of the earth, like...
Actually, you know what?
The lines of the, to make it a globe or whatever?
It's actually not a granite ball. It's like this... I actually think it's like... If I remember correctly, it's like made of brass or something. It's huge.
Yeah.
And it's got like the earth
see the
sort of
continents
carved
on
into
there,
it,
yeah.
but it's like got some crazy, it's just badass looking. But there's like a little thing around it where you're not supposed to go up and touch it. Well, while we were there, somebody jumped inside that thing and grabbed it and just spun it. It was like, started moving around.
So what's cool? That's crazy. Because what's cool about the one, like when I went to the one in Houston, I went with Stephanie, right? So like we were going up there, and I saw that thing, and I was like, oh my god! And I ran up to it, and I grabbed it, stopped it, and I mean, it's like you didn't have to walk through water; it was like right there. But yeah, that's the first thing I did too, is run over to it and grab it and spin it.
That guy got in trouble though.
Oh, I didn't
because
get in
it
trouble.
had a little thing you're not supposed to touch it.
Oh, well, this one
it was
like
shiny metal.
Oh yeah, this one you could walk right up to it.
Yeah,
most people couldn't. Maybe they didn't have the patience because it's an enormous granite thing. It was moving really slowly. But when I grabbed it with my, you can't really grab it because it's huge. I put my palms on it and I was like, I finally got it to slow down and stop. And then I was able to, I'm like, yeah.
That's cool. You feel the inertia, man.
Yeah, dude, it was amazing. I was like, how is it just fucking, what? Like, how is it floating? And I figured out with the water eventually, but I was like, okay, so they must use a really strong pump. And the woman from the museum was like, no, it's a little bitty pump. I was like, what?
Yeah. Hydraulics.
Yeah,
man.
hydraulics are badass. Can't compress water.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like those bowls look like you'd have a big ball bearing sitting in them, and that tube is where you inject the lubricant, or like you're saying, a pump that you pump the water into it with, and then you can roll anything on it.
Yeah, yeah. I can't imagine what they were doing that for, but still, it was really cool. Like, in other words, I guess the point we're getting at
Except
here is these things look
there's
like
never
tools.
been any stone balls found around there. I don't
right,
think.
but there are stone balls around the world that are weird.
Yeah, there are.
Okay, so I just recently found this out. The ones that most of the stone balls, aside from the hundreds that poured out of that hill in San Francisco, which those disappeared, most of the stone balls that are known to be ancient, like actual ancient stone balls, were found in like Costa Rica.
Aren't they? I thought they were around like where the Olmec stuff was found. Is that not right?
Costa Rica is what I said.
Okay,
and that may be Olmec. I don't know. I just know that like those probably so a lot of people have tried to figure out because of their placement, right? So that all these stone balls are all over the place in the jungle.
And they're different sizes.
Yeah, they're vastly different sizes. Some of them are enormous, and then some of them are very small, like like a baseball sized. And then there's ones that are in between, all through there. But some of them are huge, like 8 feet in diameter, like these enormous spheres of stone. And the stone itself is not. I don't know if it's granite, but it isn't a sedimentary rock. It is
it's one of the hard ones.
Yeah, like basalt or something like that. But people have tried for like almost a century now to figure out what they were based on and I've seen all these theories like they were stars and blah, and I'm like, no, like they weren't set in anything, they're just kind of like there on the ground. So
Oh wait, what are you saying? Is that where the stone balls are?
It's Costa Rica, or maybe it's a different one.
He's saying Costa Rica is in the southern edge of the rainforest area that begins in Guatemala that they just lidard.
Okay.
That's a good point. If that's where they're at, though, like.
Yeah, but they've been moved. All of them. Well, all the ones that have been found were obviously, and they're really easy to move because they're balls. You can roll them, right?
But 8 foot in diameter, that's not really.
Yeah, but it's still easier than a block, right?
That's true. Yeah.
But this is the thing. Like,
That's how they built the pyramid.
they rolled it there as a
They
ball.
cut all the stones into balls and they rolled them up their stupid ramp
and then cut them into blocks.
and then they cut them into square blocks.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
where
the balls are in Costa Rica.
Okay, good.
They're perfect spheres.
Yes, they're perfect. Like, and even so, however old they might be, people, mainstream thinks that they're maybe 1,000 years at most, a couple hundred. But whatever it is, whatever the age is, the fact that they're still perfect spheres and they've been sitting out in the elements for forever. I think the same thing about the Olmec face, like those Olmec heads. I'm like, look at that. Look how beautiful and precise that is. And it's been like face up to the rain, to the jungle rain for like thousands of years. What did it look like when it was like freshly done?
Probably polished, like
shiny. It was probably shiny. But I saw, like, I've looked at all these things with these spheres, and people have tried to come up with theories of what they were, and like they're all these, because they're kind of just randomly all over the place. And then finally somebody was like, no, those were probably pushed up there by a wave. So the idea is that they were down on the continental shelf. Because the water level rose 400 feet. So like the balls came up into Costa Rica from some enormous tidal wave. And they were just deposited there by the water randomly all over the place. But
maybe there was like a giant ancient megalithic HEB parking lot down there. Yeah. And all those fucking
they're like
balls.
bollards, right? Yeah. You don't want like stupid concrete pillars in front of your store, so you put giant balls out there. Yeah. Yeah.
The HEBs around here have these huge concrete balls all around the parking lot.
That's right. Yeah. They take the place of the pillars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they look nicer.
Right. But you still can't drive your car through them and smash into the store. Yeah.
But you could roll a giant block on top of them, maybe.
Yeah, you could probably do that
if they weren't anchored down. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like they cut those out and they were using them to roll the giant blocks with. That's a good idea.
No, that's not really good.
Yeah. They don't really have any that are the same size. Now, so the ones that they found in Costa Rica, they're now all over the place in Costa Rica.
Besides, what you would end up with would not be perfect spheres.
Right.
If they were rolling blocks on them, they would end up being like sort of cylindrical shaped or oblong.
Yeah.
I don't know what the shape. I don't know my 3-dimensional geometry shapes. But
I know you're talking about the snake making out of clay shape.
Yeah. It would kind of look like that with rounded side.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're perfect spheres, which is that doesn't sound like a big deal, but like
it's
making
it's
a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like basically the idea where you could if you put a piece of tape around it or a piece of string around it, and then you can like roll that string all the way around, keeping it at the maximum diameter, and it's the same in every direction. That's
try to get some spherical calipers and
try to make one with any modern equipment you can get your hands on.
Yeah, go get a piece of wood
and make a perfect sphere.
Make a perfect sphere. Out of it.
Go ahead. Let us know how that goes. It's not easy. You basically need a machine to do it. The machine can do it because it's it doesn't make mistakes. But I just found the idea that they were actually washed up onto Costa Rica from like tidal waves. I was like, holy shit. Because that made me think like, what's down there?
Yeah.
Where did they come from?
Yeah, that's cool.
Because there's an enormous source of gigantic stone spheres down.
What would they need them for? Like, I don't know. What would be the purpose?
But on
aesthetic?
I don't know. But on Easter Island, everybody pays attention to the moai and shit. But there's other stuff on Easter Island that's weird. And one of them is a stone ball that is kind of in this. It's in a weird spot that like it's kind of rocky and mountainous there, and there's a little bitty like tiny valley or whatever, and there's just this freaking stone sphere sitting in the middle of it, and all the natives there say that that's the most important thing on the island.
Whoa!
And it looks to me like I looked at that later after learning about the idea that the Costa Rica balls were washed up with a wave, and I was like, that's what that looks like. It's in a weird spot, and you can imagine an enormous wave just depositing it in this weird rocky sort of bowl, this little valley. And it now it just sits there, and the natives are like, "That's the most important thing." And I'm like, "So what is that? What does that mean?
Billiards.
What do you
gods.
mean? Yeah, billiards of the gods." I mean, I've seen theories that those were like, like catapult or trebuchet, freaking.
Come on.
Yeah, like
what are you gonna just grab anything? You don't need to spend all that time
This
making
perfect
a perfect sphere.
Yeah, I know.
It's gonna fly straight. No, it won't.
Yeah, no, it's not going to fly straight. And then if it lands and doesn't hit anything, guess what? They're going to throw it back at you. So yeah,
It's not gonna make any difference.
Yeah, you just throw whatever. Trebuchets are not known for their pinpoint accuracy.
This stone's gonna curve, man, because it's got a weird edge. No, it's not.
Not unless it's billiards of the gods and they're getting some fucking English on it.
Now, what would be really crazy is if we found one that had laces.
Oh, yeah.
Then you're like, okay, now they might be throwing some curve,
Yeah.
some curveballs.
That was definitely a knuckleball by Prometheus. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know about the spheres, but like the quality of the stonework indicates to me that this was done by the Hanan Pacha culture, like these people who were.
And on Easter Island, there's the same sort of like cyclopean.
Yes. The platforms that they built that put the Moai on are cyclopean, and they have the same. Like they have all these weird little signatures that you see, like the little bitty tiny one that's kind of at the four corners of other large pieces.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like this little bitty thing, and it's like kind of,
Yeah. The ones, I think it was Ollantay Tambo on top of the mountain, the big slabs with the tiny slivers.
Yeah.
Those tiny slivers all have like tiny little knobs in them.
Yeah.
All the way
Injection
up.
ports. Yeah.
Injection ports.
Well, but people have said like those.
And then one of those big slabs has like this crazy geometric, like Aztec looking stair step sort of design just impressed into it.
Or it's actually
sticking
extruding.
out.
Yeah, it's extruding. And the weirdest thing about that, when I found like some high res photographs, God, we got to go to these places. But I found some high res photographs of it, and I was looking at it really closely. And that stair step pattern that's on there, it's like it sticks out like it's high relief, but the corners are drooping. Like that's really strange to me. Like that would be something I would say. Okay, now that the idea that it's a geopolymer is. That's an interesting idea for that one, because like why would you carve something and have the corners droop like they look like they were wet when you made them?
The first time you were showing me some of this stuff years ago, you were telling me you had this thing. You were like, it looks like like some little kid like was playing around with this butter knife thing that cut stone. He's just like,
yeah.
And it's not like it's like if you're thinking of it in sort of traditional terms of stone cutting, it's like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But if there was a tool that could just carve stone like butter, you could see how like somebody had the machine and was just out there with some
playing with it.
Massive machine that had this butter knife on it, and they're just like blamp, 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 and just chopping little things and making stairways out of clay and what.
Yeah, I said
not really a kid, but you could see a somebody that's first starting to play with clay, and they have a knife and they can cut it into shapes that it looks like they might be doing this, because like some of the stairs like sort of slant and twist, and then there's just little pock marks taken out of stuff, and then there's little squares cut, and
I said it's like it's whimsical. Like in other words, you can't really associate any of these, and it's widespread all through the Andes. There are these crazy, like you just come upon this spot where like this rough stone has been cut flat and perfect, and then like they left little knobs sticking out of it, and then and then some of the stone that they cut off that thing they cut into perfect fucking cubes that have drooping corners, and you're like, what the actual fuck is going on here? Like, and I had this idea. The picture in my head was like a little kid, grabs a power tool from his dad's shop and goes out into the woods, right? And he's making cuts in trees and trunks and logs on the ground or whatever. And the cuts themselves are very precise and like incredibly clean because the tool does it that way. But the kid has no plan and he's just playing, right?
Yeah.
That was I'm not saying that it was a kid, like you said. What I'm saying is that was the picture I got, that somebody was playing with a very powerful tool.
Yeah. And
they were just kind of like, they were probably practicing, maybe is a better word. Like maybe they were out there just like, what can I do with this thing? How does it work? Like fucking magnets. How does it work? And like now we're looking at it and we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like they had the shamir and they're just,
Exactly.
they're just like
they had some tool that could cut, and by the nature of the tool, it could not but make precise cuts and very clean lines and everything like that. And so they would make these Dr. Seuss staircases that like are weird and spiraling and they droop on one side or whatever. And then there's vitrification left in some of the places on those things, you know. And some of that vitrification is within enclosed areas. Like there was one I was looking at where you kind of go through this. It looks like they cut into the mountain, so they made a natural like a cut cave, and there's vitrification inside that, which is like that's harder to explain, you know, with fire because it's deep inside this enclosed sort of protected. Like it looks like the tool itself may have sometimes vitrified the outside edges to harden it, right?
Right.
Or maybe the action of the tool, but no, because not all of it's vitrified. Now, what's fascinating, I was thinking of this when you were talking about the vitrification. That Millennium Falcon in the bottom of the Baltic Sea, it has the same property. The very outside of it, like, and they saw this, but from the sonar that they were hitting it with, and the geologist was pointing it out, that there's about 2 millimeters of the material on the very outside edge that's incredibly hard and dense because it's vitrified, but the material inside that is not. Which to me, like, that was the biggest indication to me that this was made.
Dude, that thing, like, flew from some explosion.
Yeah, because
and landed in the freaking
because of
Baltic Sea.
The long track, the track that's got behind it. Yeah, and then there's this enormous cleft mountain behind it as well. There's this huge V shape.
Like, just like it. Dang.
It's really strange. Yeah. And its iron content was incredibly high.
So like that whole area, like if it got hit, you know, by some comet fragment or whatever, and just like there was some massive city or site, and all stone architecture, and it just nailed, and that thing just kind of flew out as like one piece.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like some ejecta came down and like knocked this piece like way far.
And it just like flew, flying.
Yeah, and so the Baltic Sea is not very old either. Like most recent indications are that it probably flooded at the end of the last ice age, and it is now, you know, right? So like
there's like a dam, some type of dam
that would have been broken. Yeah, so it probably landed on dry land. And then right after that, it was inundated with water, and it still is underwater today. So the fact that it was vitrified, and then it's so regular in structure, and then it has all the indications of being like Hananpacha type of stone. It's just the weirdest thing to me about that thing was the fact that it's mushroom shaped. Like when all the pictures you see of it are from directly above down, right? Because that's most of the pictures. But when they dove on it, they found that it was actually sort of like think of like if you took two Frisbees and put them on top, like together, right? So you'd have this sort of bulging disc shape, and then you set that down on something, or maybe it's erosive. So you set it down on sand or whatever, and then you let water like run all around it, and it leaves it sort of standing
a little
on this
pedestal.
Yes, it's on a pedestal.
Like when it rains really hard, you see that with all these tiny little stones.
Right, they're on little pedestals. Yeah. So this thing is on a pedestal like that.
Yeah, and the current is like really strong. So
yes, all day.
After thousands and thousands of years of doing that, you know, you could see that it would be sitting up on a pedestal.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like mushroom shaped, like a really fat Millennium Falcon shaped mushroom. All right. I think that's going to be about it for this show. That was a great show.
Yeah. Hey, we want to thank the guys from Mind the Hive too, for coming out and joining us, and we're really looking forward to this partnership.
Yep.
And keep it flowing.
Yep.
Mind the snakes. Mind the hives.
Mining hives.
Getting the juice.
Finding the nuggets. All right, you guys can, as always, you can go to brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com to comment on the blog, and there is a link there to Mind the Hive. You can email us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. You can go, if you want to give us reviews, which would be great, you can go to iTunes, but I think we found out you have to have the software, so that sucks. But you can go to TuneIn, you can go to, what's the other one? There's Stitcher, and then there's one more that I cannot remember the name of. Player FM, yeah, that's right. So any one of those, you guys can give us reviews if you want to. And damn it, we have a review that I keep, like, So my plan with the reviews is anybody that puts one up on any one of these, like we will read it on the show because that's awesome. And we have one that I intend to read on the show. I keep forgetting, so we're gonna do that. We need to remember to do that.
It'll happen.
It'll happen, I swear. So so that would be great. And I think that's about it.
Yep.
We'll see you guys next time. But remember, this episode was the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
And snakes.